Oh, hi, meeting. We'll bring this up.
Perfect. There we go. Okay. Um, I'm just gonna take a moment, excuse me. Today we are going to talk about the body as energy. I changed the title of this a couple times, but that title seemed to be the most appropriate. So the invitation today is going to be, yeah, just holding an entirely different conceptualization and lens of how we've been taught to look at our physical body. And the piece that I'll speak to about the importance of this is when we start looking at what actual health is, not necessarily disease, but actual health. It's all going to come back to energy regulation, even behaviors or like physical behaviors or physical thoughts that we want to change. It's pattern energy use. And so we ultimately, as we increase our awareness of what's happening, from that unconscious standpoint, I think consciously there's about 5% of what we do that's, present and aware, and 95% is a lot of automatic. I don't want to say automatic means unconscious, but there may or may not be an awareness in knowing that you're going through that process. So when we look at behavior as that patterned energy use, if you don't like the state or where you find yourself, you always get to pick again. And that's one of the beautiful things about the body is it's not an undo, it's always an and. So a lot of times, we think about like, oh, if I eat this food and then I go to the gym, right, I'm undoing what I did. And that's not necessarily actually how our physicality works. But the beautiful part of the and is you can have the experience of whatever it is you ate. You can have the experience of going to the gym. And if you didn't like what happened, you get to choose again. There will always be a choosing again. Um, that invitation into awareness is also going to influence physiology because of our perception. So a lot of what we talk about in, day to day is going to be this external cause has an effect on me internally. And there is an aspect of that that is true. But what if seeing yourself in an entirely new way let your internal state create your external state? And so again, as we look at the body through these different mechanisms of energy and various I don't even want to call them theories, but ancient indigenous practices, I just invite you to kind of hold a greater awareness of what is possible. Because again, we're taught, especially with mental health, this is what's wrong, this is the disorder. But when we actually want to look at the body through a lens of health, we have to come back to this energy regulation. And that is what all of these things speak to. They may not necessarily use the word ATP, but you'll see energy is in there in some way, shape, or form. So getting into actually what energy is. So we're going to talk physics for just a little bit. Some of this stuff is, when you really get into quantum physics and various things way above my head, and not things that I'm incredibly well versed in, but just kind of going over the definition of energy to start with. It's defined as the quantitative property that must be transferred to an object or system to perform work or to heat that object or system. And so something to consider when looking at energy through a physics standpoint is it is a conserved scalar quantity, excuse me, representing the capacity to do work. And what that scalar emphasis is that there is no time or space. There's no direction, actually. So the value has magnitude, meaning there's time, temperature, volume, but there is no time, no space, no direction. And that is a field in itself that let me back up. We find ourselves physically orienting to time and space all the time. So when we actually want to work with energy, we have to almost remove ourselves from this time and space. And that's where practices like meditation and yoga and um Tai Chi and other breath work, right? Put you into these various brainwave states to create different experiences where you can actually move outside of time and space. Um, Energy is going to exist in the world of physics in two forms, kinetic and potential. Kinetic is going to be the energy an object possesses due to its motion, where the potential is that stored energy based on an object's position, composition, or condition. We won't really go too much into that, but I did want to touch on the first law of thermodynamics, excuse me. A little tongue-tied today. When we are invited to even look at our emotions as energy, right? What we feel in our body, traditionally what we've kind of been taught in certain ways along the way is, well, how do you feel about that? Let that feeling in your body be the truth, but we put knowledge to it without necessarily getting curious about it, which means the invitation that that emotion offers could actually be entirely different from what we logically put to it. So when we can take a step back and really begin to look at these emotions as energy, right? Invitations, the first law of thermodynamics is going to say that a closed system maintains a constant total energy, which means that energy can only transform from one state to another. It cannot be created, it cannot be destroyed. So if you actually think about emotional experiences, right, even moving from anger to sadness to neutrality to love, that is the spectrum happening always. There is no, I want this, I don't want this, turn this off, let's get rid of this. How do I make this? It's one entire spectrum. So when we can really just begin to see, right, even our emotional states as energy, and again, all of the inputs coming together to create that experience, your choice, as I mentioned earlier, is always going to be an and, right? What else can I add? You can also ask, what can I subtract? Because the subtraction is not necessarily saying you're undoing something, but it's becoming cognizant that maybe what you are doing isn't creating the experience that you're looking for.
I have a question on this.
Yeah.
Um, I just want to make sure I'm understanding kind of where this is going. Um, so is this like kind of inferring that we should look at ourselves as a closed system?
So that's a great question. Thanks for asking that. You don't necessarily need to look at yourself as a closed system. And I should actually probably take that word out because energetically, no, you are not a closed system. And we'll go
Okay.
into that. Basically, what it's saying is once something starts, it's going to continue that way.
Okay.
Okay. So maybe emotions aren't necessarily the best analogy to use for this, but something like, let's say when you start your car.
Hmm.
Right. Whatever systems come to be, I'm not a mechanic, so I'm not going to have total appropriate language for this.
Same. So
Okay, perfect.
you could make it up and I'll believe you.
Great. Great. I'm not gonna make it up, but thank you for saying. And will still fact check me on all of it. But ultimately, whatever systems start, that amount of energy is going to be what moves through.
Hmm.
Okay, so a closed system would basically just mean that things can come in that can influence, I guess. See, now that's a great question because now I'm actually
Yeah.
like, I don't know.
What defines the closed
What
system?
defines the closed system?
And this is somewhat embarrassing because I actually have an
No,
engineering degree and I took a whole class on thermodynamics. Shows you.
you, no, not at all. No one would have known that either. So, but no, it's a perfect question, and honestly,
Like
that's
I've always kind of like struggled with this idea that energy cannot be created or destroyed. Like I can't wrap my head around that when it comes to like, you know what I mean?
I do, and so when you say it in that way, maybe the closed system isn't necessarily something concrete because everything is one, right?
Right.
So I'm
Right.
just going to kind of zoom out and if energy can't be created or destroyed, it's because it's always existing, no matter
Okay.
what.
Yeah.
So maybe even the concept of a closed system. I'm going to look into that this week, and we'll do some office hours on that on Friday because I'm very curious about where this conversation can go in the different ways now. Maybe
Mhm.
that closed system, I've always kind of, yeah, thought of it as like, here's the pipe, nothing's coming in, nothing's coming out. But as I really sit with that, I'm like, that's not how energy works at all.
Right.
Like it's impacted by everything at every single point all the time. So maybe
Right.
the closed system is
Our
more of
universe.
exactly. That's what I was going to go with. Even
Yeah.
though I'm like, is it closed? But it's infinite, right? So it's
Right.
ever expansive, which means it's all encompassing in
Yeah.
some way. So maybe closed can mean that.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, I guess like bringing this up, is it more to just kind of understand how like going back to your example of emotions, is it like you're always going to have emotions and it's like trying to work with the energy that you have?
you're always going to have emotions because your body is an electrical current. Your
Right.
body is energetic. There
Right.
is
You're
always
like,
electricity
if
running.
emotions is energy, you're always going to have it. You just have to learn how to work with it,
Yes,
essentially. Okay.
essentially. Yes, yes. Well, and then it takes us into, so in biology, energy exists as ATP, which we've done so many conversations about. Um, I'll come back to this part. This photo to me is one of the most beautiful photos that I've ever seen because I don't know if you can see in the middle some of like the main chakras.
Hmm. Yeah.
We have like we're taught that we have the traditional seven, right? And chakra in itself literally means like wheel or disc. But all of the lines that are running, those are called nadis. Nadis is Sanskrit, I believe, for little rivers.
Hmm.
And so we have all of these little rivers running through us, not just within our physical body, but even outside of us. So the invitation really today, and I appreciate you catching that word, don't get too caught up on um the closed aspect just yet. Let's shelf that because I do want to do some research and thank you for bringing that to my attention.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure. The invitation here is to just begin to see yourself through the various energetic layers and bodies because ultimately everything comes back to energy. So this is actually an excerpt from Joe Dispenza's Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. And just to give a little pre-context to it, one of the things that he speaks to before setting this copy up that I took from his book, or this excerpt that I took, is basically saying like he, right, will talk to individuals that are very much in the material scientific world that don't necessarily see the innate life force energy, that don't see the energy necessarily as divine or magic or all-encompassing. And so what he writes, which is what I copied here, is kind of how some of these conversations go with some of these individuals who have that very analytical mind of like, well, this is the body and this is the structure of it and this is how it works. Because ultimately he says everything is energy, right? So he asks, where does, looking at the intelligence that keeps our heart beating, like where does that come from? Someone with a, much more Western uh, we'll go sterile view of the body will say, oh, part of the autonomic nervous system. Well, where is that at? That's in the brain. Within the brain, are there specific tissues that are responsible for keeping that heart beating? Yes. What are they made up of? Cells. And we've gone over cells night and day, right? What are those cells made up of? Molecules. Those molecules are made up of atoms. Those atoms are made up of subatomic particles. And these subatomic particles are made up of energy. So the invitation for that first law is to just see that energy is always interplaying and always this expressive experience. That was at least my intention for putting it in. Now I actually need to go in and actually look at it through that lens because I didn't even catch that word closed. But yeah, so essentially that's kind of the invitation for today, because again, going back to the beginning, when we can really begin to look at our overall health, not necessarily just through diagnostic criteria and kind of that westernized, this is what we've been taught about health or disease, basically. The disease being the cause of the symptoms, right? So the disease being the cause of the effects. When we move it over into looking at it as energy, now we get to actually move up, right? Meaning if we're looking at it as energy, let's look at those chains, right? We'll get into even, I guess I can hop into it now. We're going to see where each wheel, disc, each chakra is literally related to a gland.
Mm.
How the entirety of the body now overlays and comes together to invite one to see that divine life force energy that actually exists within, so that all of these things, parts, glands, organs, etc., that we've labeled and identified, there's that overlay, right? So when again, we can take the cell and move it into energy, but we can also take that energy and move it back in. Again, with that deeper invitation of, are we able to see ourselves not just as parts, right? But again, going back to that universal divine connection, can we see that animate life force energy within us, within everything else? And when we start to see ourselves in that light, what limiting beliefs actually get to be dissolved that we've learned about ourselves, because now we see ourselves through an entirely different lens. Does that answer your question?
Mhm.
Okay,
Mhm.
we're going to go back and then we're going to come forward. Um, so yeah, we talked about ATP. We went over that. So in most ancient practices, energy is actually viewed as our life force energy. So that's kind of that, shifting even of the word energy, right? We have it in physics, we have it in biology. When it comes to spirituality, this is the thing that keeps us alive. We see it in traditional Chinese medicine regarded as the life force in all living beings. I'm gonna move my little box a little bit. Yeah, it's just considered that link between our environment and our body. Chinese medicine will speak to meridian points. So you'll see that in, I forget the name of the practice. I think it's Tai Chi. Um, and even in the book, The Body Code, that's in, I think I moved the body code over. I will double check. I know it's in the Google Drive, but I'll add it to the master resources. But these meridian points, sometimes even in tapping, right? Or even when you're doing breath work or yoga, you can feel energy move in certain spaces, certain directions. And traditional Chinese medicine will say these little rivers, right, have, and it's not, the 72,000 nadis necessarily, but we have these electrical channels where energy primarily flows in our body. In yoga and Hindu philosophy, we see in the Vedic text energy considered our vital breath. Like I said, it moves through subtle energy channels called nadis. So what we did for yoga last week and what we did for yoga yesterday in Kundalini, those subtle bodies were really working a lot with the nadis to open and clear some of those subtle energetic channels up. Again, very much considered encoded intelligence that shapes life. Um, yeah, chakras are going to be those energy centers where the nadis meet. And we have about 72,000 nadi channels in the body. I read somewhere else that we had maybe 350,000, but the emphasis in either of those numbers, going back to some of the ancient text, is it just means that there's too many to count. So we don't really need to know how many. We just need to understand that they exist and that they play a significant role because of the amount that there are. Excuse me, it was Sanskrit for Little River. Beautiful photo. Yeah, every time I see it, I'm just like, it's so, like, that's your field, that's your space, that's everything that keeps you alive and lets you connect and interface, right? Even when we talk about deceptions and exteroception. Like some of this fits under that label technically. So it's beautiful when we can look at our body in those different ways. Um, I do want to touch back just on the chakras, and I'll probably upload this photo. I got this actually during my Reiki training. And I won't go over each one just because of time. But each chakra is going to obviously have a different location. It's going to connect to a different sound. We'll talk about sound and mantra in a couple weeks. Just about that is frequency and how that interfaces with these the energetic centers, excuse me. But again, going back to that notion of physical, right? So let me move this again. So we have our root chakra, which is going to be connected to our sexual organs. There is also part of the adrenal system that will connect to that as well. The sacral is going to be creative, sexual, life force energy. Solar plexus is going to be connected to our pancreas and our adrenal glands. So when we see sometimes, when we see yellow and tapping, right, that sacral is going to be really connected to our joy, our personal power, our gut instincts, different things of that nature. And you'll see within each, and I'll put this up for this reason, you'll see within each gland functions of that and what it looks like when it's balanced and what it looks like when it's unbalanced. So again, just these different perspectives are going to allow us to open up having an entirely different view of our body and when it speaks to us, what it's speaking, instead of just being, in the box that we've been taught to be in. Heart is going to be connected to the thymus. That's going to have to do with respiration, circulation, our heart, our lungs, our vagus nerve, our lymph in the middle of our body. We'll see, just for an example, when this is in balance, one easily gives and receives love, one's compassionate, one's caring, there's a sense of openness. When this is unbalanced, someone may notice heart and lung problems. They may notice some jealousy or codependency, or maybe some bitterness, feeling intolerant. Just some various energetic personality pieces that can come up in relationship to, again, that center, right? Or even that gland. Throat is going to be connected to thyroid. Third eye is going to be connected to pituitary. And the crown is going to be connected to the pineal. Or do I have that back? I apologize. Third eye is connected to the pineal, and the crown is connected to the pituitary. I did have those backwards, but I will scan this and put it in the doc. So as each kind of go through your own journey, I do recommend even just this type of stuff when we go into tapping, right? And you're working with some of those visual representations in your day-to-day life. If you do notice colors, take that back to the chakra, take that to the system that is connected to that, because there will be a number of invitations and, a variety of different ways based on what is going on in your own life that image, color, meaning may be supportive and then, or will be supportive, but then maybe potentially with some of the, additional knowledge, even some of the sound, you might find a call to try something different. Oh, that one was supposed to be over there. Oh, well. Just a couple other examples of how energy is viewed as that life force energy. So even in Kundalini, right, we look at that coiled energy. It's the serpent that's coiled 3.5 times at the base of the spine that when awakened through the kriyas and the mudras and the mantras and the things that we do in class, when awakened, it brings heightened states of consciousness and energy flow. So the idea is to awaken that energy, let it move through the chakras to reach that state of enlightenment. And even in Japanese philosophy, we see this universal spirit or vitality that animates all things, people, animals, nature. It can be used in healing practices, Reiki, things of that nature for balancing life force energy. You'll even see this in things like cranial sacral, right? gong, sound bowls. There's so many healing modalities that use these um frames of references is so minimal medicine. Yeah, that use this medicine because it's medicine. Um, it's just not medicine in the way that we have been taught within the model and structure that we have today. I found this interesting that there are actually chakras. They're called something different in the legs down to the feet, but they're a mirroring. So again, the whole body just as this interconnected system, that when the body speaks to us, rather than looking at it through a lens of symptom management or disease, right? How is this the body's, even if it's the energetic bodies, right? Perfect response based on what it has experienced and or what it has not experienced. And that could be the last 24 to 48 hours. That could be the last 20, 40 years of your life, right? Or even longer. So when we can just really hold a different view, we get a lot of different answers. The reason I wanted to show this one, is because there's something really beautiful in, and I use this word purposefully, um, understanding just even from an etymology standpoint means to stand under. So I'm very conscious of when I use that word because, to me, when we say I understand, we better understand something that we fully believe in, right? We say like that is truth with a capital T. And I will stand under those laws because that governs everything around us. Um, but something in understanding this energy through various cultural lens. This is Brofenbrenner's ecological model. And most of the time, even just from a Western cultural standpoint, what we're taught is to look at our own past, right? What was your childhood like? What was your family structure like? We really look at that microsystem. And my invitation in sharing this is to begin to see how all of these different systems interplay with the system within it. Meaning, if you look at the macro system, right, we have attitudes and ideologies of the culture that is going to impact extended family and neighborhoods. That's going to impact your family, where you go to school, your friends, what um, healthcare options are around you, what, religious organizations or even just natural forms of medicine, right? Like everything within your life and how you experience life and understand life is going to come from that culture. And even looking at the chronos system and that environmental change, just think about that as earth, right? And just how the earth changes. That's going to influence culture. That's going to influence our family. So I just invite this image because if we were to consider the various cultural lenses, right, we may not have been raised in that or taught that ourselves, but we all now have the opportunity to learn the things if what we have been taught doesn't align with us anymore. And just kind of inviting that conversation of earth, right? When we actually begin to even look at the electromagnetic frequency of earth, earth itself is alive. She has her own heartbeat. And this electromagnetic field is known as the Schumann resonance. There is a very fundamental frequency that it vibrates at about 7.83 hertz. And what research speaks to is it's this natural heartbeat. So when we talk about, co-regulating, right? When people come up to the mountains or they go on a really long hike or they're in nature for a really good chunk of time and they're like, I feel really clear and I feel really grounded, right? They express all of those positive attributes of how they are, experiencing themselves. It's because they're co-regulating with a field that is alive in the same way that when we're babies, we co-regulate with mom, right? Or dad. We are constantly in regulation with everyone. We have been taught in a number of ways to disconnect from that, right? But that's really what that ventral vagal is, that in connection, in community, when we have um, the most trust in our physical body to attune, right, and sense what the environment is giving us. It's no longer about trying to control the environment, but trusting in our innate wisdom that then lets us actually interface in ways that we don't logically maybe know how, but our body, when we're in that flow state, is primed to receive and work with. So again, this should say ELF, excuse me. And I'll kind of explain that difference in a minute. Well, I guess we can keep it as electromagnetic field for now. The reason I just said that is because there's a difference between a natural EMF, I believe, and an artificial one. I'm still not 100% certain if the ELF is the real one and the EMF is the artificial. So I want to just comment on that for this purpose. What I have sensed so far is that ELF is a type of EMF, but I do want to clarify that. But just going back to looking at that Schumann resonance, that heartbeat, right? Spiritually viewed, we are again tapping into this energetic matrix that connects all of consciousness, right? Earth has its own heartbeat, its own consciousness, and we are able to connect to that. That aura, right, is going to synchronize all of us together. So again, that Schumann resonance, that electromagnetic frequency, that field of the earth is seen as a conduit for collective consciousness, seen as a protective shield. It helps support, foster deep meditation, spiritual awareness. This is the reason. Oh, I'll give you a little photo real fast. So again, right, if we were to and I should have pulled up a photo of this. Oh, if we go back to the little rivers, right? Just how the energy is literally outside of the physical. You see that here as well. I wanted to play this video real fast because it's just beautiful.
It's possible that there's an
Let's see. You're still on my PowerPoint, aren't you? Okay. See if I can.
You might just be sharing that instead of your actual screen.
Yeah. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to stop share and we're going to share again. Sorry, guys. Probably have to do that 1 or 2 times until I figure this out. The Heart Math Institute is a beautiful organization that is doing research on collective consciousness, looking at how all of the elements that I just spoke to really come together and how as we change, right? When we come back to this, like live in accordance to how you want to live, how that actually gets to be like the ripple impact for the entire collective consciousness. I mentioned it in a couple slides later, but even there's research that even shows that when 1% of a city gathers for meditation, some type of collective prayer, that 1% is actually able to reduce crime and all these, I would say negative, I'm just going to put that word in quotes, harmful aspects within a city. So I think they did one in Chicago specifically, and it reduced gun violence. And I think they noticed even like a decrease in like ER visits and things of that nature, because when one group is intentionally aligning, right, not just their own mind and heart, that cohesion is huge. But then you have an entire group of individuals doing that, that is going to be sent out even stronger. So I wanted to just show this video. It's just a couple of minutes, but
worldwide network of interconnected
beautiful.
hearts and minds where human consciousness dances in synchrony? Is there a united global consciousness that weaves our individual stories into a grand tapestry of human experience? What happens when significant global events capture our collective attention and stir our emotions? These are some of the questions being asked by the scientists behind the Global Consciousness Project 2.0. Through the use of specialized technology, we seek to demystify interconnectivity and uncover the true impact of individual and collective consciousness in our world. Although we may not be able to see it, we all exist in a global field of consciousness. The Global Consciousness Project utilizes next-gen random number generators to help people see the unseen that connects us all. Hosted by our partnering citizen scientists around the world, the RNGs generate truly random numbers at a high volume. Once the data is cleared of any expected potential patterns, such as weather or electrical changes, researchers are then able to accurately measure and analyze any non-random patterns that arise. There's growing evidence that human emotions, and especially large-scale collective experiences, may hold the power to orchestrate the RNG's randomness into something more than coincidence. You can think of the random number generators as essentially listening to the heartbeat of humanity. When the world celebrates or mourns, be it the exhilaration of a World Cup victory or the sorrow of a global tragedy, the network of devices pick up on these modulations in the global consciousness. In response, they produce patterns that defy the laws of randomness, coming together to create something meaningful, something beyond chance. This groundbreaking data allows us to effectively measure the impact of human consciousness on our world. For instance, scientists have been able to observe that overall, events that evoke love and compassion tend to create higher levels of coherence in the RNG network. If enough large groups of people collectively radiate their heart's caring intentions out to humanity, could it begin to positively shift global consciousness itself? When people can see the very real impact our emotions and attitudes have on the world around us, we hope it will inspire more of society to take action and contribute energetically to the positive transformation of our world. This will be key to overcoming humanity's biggest challenges, healing separation, and creating a compassionate world where all can thrive. We invite you to join this pioneering citizen science effort. This project would not be possible without our donors and citizen scientists. If you're interested in hosting a
Stop it there. If you're interested, you're definitely welcome to finish finish watching it and reach out accordingly. But yeah, I just wanted to share that as part of the invitation in this conversation, because one, there is so much research being done to be able to scientifically explain some of these concepts that I think otherwise, just with again, the Western culture and the way we've been taught, wouldn't necessarily be absorbed, right, by some. But even just, the tying into energy, right, and the openness of being able to connect and see a different world and all of those, various aspects. Yeah, it just seemed like a beautiful invitation and video to add into this. This is the one of the studies I was speaking to when it came to studying prayer. I'm probably going to say this wrong, Maharishi effect suggests that when a small percentage of a population practices some type of transcendental meditation, there's again that field of coherence, which results in reduced crime, lower stress indications, improved social harmony. And I have some links where you guys can go in and, dive deeper in. But yeah, research shows that 1% of a city, or the square root of 1% of a larger population, can produce those impacts alone, which is just so powerful. Like, I think that just really goes to show it. Yes, ideally, right? 99, 100% would partake. And if it's just that 1% to start with, right, that can make such a shift, that shift makes a shift. And it's just, again, that continual flow of energy, which then, going back to even just our conversation from the beginning, Katie, of like closed, right? Maybe that is the idea, is like, again, the universe is closed. Like, it's not, right? because we're all connected and, engaged, but maybe that's the idea because everything is one,
Mm-hmm.
it can move in that way. But as
Mhm.
far as like it being in a box and tucked away,
Yeah.
you're saying on that. Um, for time, we're not going to watch this one. It's just like a couple minutes, but it does have, and normally I would never show an Instagram reel, but I found it in my research and I was like, this actually does a pretty decent job. Just kind of, speaking again to that similarity between Earth's electromagnetic field and the human body aura. So even just on that, law of correspondence, as above, as below, as within, as without, what's being mirrored, right? If we're part of that bigger collective, all is one, what are we seeing in the world that literally is a part of us? We just maybe haven't seen it in that way to start with. But I do believe that when we start to work with our aura and we work with these energetic bodies and fields that we have, there's just so much more confidence that gets built within us because we trust in ourselves. There's not even just discernment, but ability that gets created. You tune in and you feel into something different, and that creates so many positive changes. Um, and then one thing I just wanted to talk about that I thought was very interesting, just to kind of tie it in. Even the government has done plenty of research into energy. There is a documentary, I'll have to find it. It used to be on Netflix, and it wasn't, well, they did touch on it actually in there. The documentary itself was parapsychology research that came out of UCLA, studying, frequency, sound, various aspects that we'll talk about in a couple weeks. But one of the things that they did speak upon was remote viewing, and that is actually what Gateway the Gateway program that the CIA established did. And so this refers to a 1983 report analyzing Monroe Institute Gateway experience. And it was a training program designed to focus on brain hemispheric synchronization to alter consciousness. Um, they basically found that using sound allowed people to achieve deep states of relaxation, enable mental exploration beyond the physical reality. And that's literally what remote viewing is. It is somebody who is able, like they are literally in a room and they are able to transport themselves to another time and another location and be able to actually see everything around them. So if you go into and you look at, CIA remote viewing studies, there's actually a couple individuals who no longer work with the CIA that have been on podcasts like Sean Ryan, and they speak about their experience as a remote viewer and how they were able to help with hostage negotiations or like literally by like seeing where a hostage was that, they could go in and save the person. Even just using it as, surveillance and spying on other countries and, what they're doing militarily or, just other government aspects. The link at the bottom is the full report, and it's interesting. We're going to do this again. I'm going to stop share and I'm going to pull up.
Is that similar to kind of how like hypnosis works?
To an extent, and I think it will just be dependent on who you're doing hypnosis with.
Right.
Oh no, where did it go? For some reason it went away. So sorry guys, you just got a full recording of me searching my computer. But I wanted to pull this document up. So this is from June 1983. This is to the commander of the Army Operational Force at Fort Meade. And I just wanted to pull this up to highlight a couple pieces, but like right in this first one, you tasked me to provide an assessment of the Gateway experience in terms of its mechanisms and ultimate practicality. For frankly, sir, that proved to be an extremely involved and difficult business. You know, he talks about what he did in some spaces, but I wanted to come down here. Here we go. So he talks about this renowned physicist. The physics of altered human consciousness deals with some conceptualizations, excuse me, that are not easily grasped or visualized exclusively in the context of ordinary left brain linear thinking. So to borrow from this doctor's mode of expression, parts of this paper will require not only logic, but a touch of right brain intuitive insight to achieve a complete, comfortable grasp of the concepts involved. There was one other piece. Yeah, I mean, even this last one here, he says, after completing the analysis, he just wanted to point out that the resulting conclusions do not do any violence to the fundamental mainstream of either Eastern or Western belief system. He speaks even here just about having to go back to common belief systems as he went through that, which is how he, you know, got to that first piece that I started with. But just some very interesting things. So yeah, if you guys want to go in, that's just like his initial letter, and then there's probably 30 or so pages. Let's see, does it say? Oh, no, it's a lot more than 30 because that's a small guy. Yeah, I mean, and we even have we have we have photos in there, directions of time and space, just all kinds of cool stuff. So I invite that in because you know, the government's working on stuff like that.
Mm.
There's probably something to be said about it. Where
Well, and from 80 years ago, or from 1980 too, like
Yep.
think
Yep.
about what they're doing now.
There are things that I'm like, there's so much intelligence available that I think what we have access to is,
Yeah.
pull this up again, very minimal and compared to what is actually like there, you know, where but yeah, I can only imagine some of the things that they're working on. So yes, so just to kind of close, and I know we have a couple minutes so we can go into some questions. You know, as I was kind of creating this, especially these last couple weeks, I wanted to kind of just go back to the beginning to kind of keep bringing that thread all the way through. And because this course, when I went back to the beginning, I was like, oh, it's the energy, metabolic and energetic systems behind mental health, right? So just as far as the invitation to close this lesson, right? Those symptoms are going to show us metabolic processes, and those metabolic processes are energy. Energy itself is always flowing according to its own laws. And even just going back to like the concept of little river, is my script. I want to move the pictures of us so you guys can see the words on the bottom, but I don't see my cursor, so that might not happen.
Yeah, I don't see the pictures of us. I just see the
Oh,
picture.
perfect. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So you don't see what I see on my end.
No.
Great. So inviting in, right, that energy itself is always following its own laws, even just going back to that invitation of the nadis, right? Looking at the nadis as little river, looking at how much we even have learned about water in the expression of our blood chemistry and our blood plasma and what that does for um, you know, cellular support and cellular repair, how that impacts glands and organs and overall functions, right? There's so many different aspects where if we can start to see even just that stagnation of water, a stagnation of vital life force energy, we're going to see, right, the slowing down of the functions of said cells, which is ultimately then going to decrease mitochondria function. We're now also then going to have an increase in symptoms. So there's this beautiful connective whole process that gets to come to be, where whether you are going from physical to energy or energy to physical, um, there are numerous ways to begin to look at and work with the body outside of what has been taught. One thing I will say is the body works perfectly. So if you can unbox the theories and the disorders that label, right? And we hold some of these aspects of like, you know, innate wisdom and intelligence of the body, right? What is our body if it were operating truly at its fullest capacity? What would that even look like? Right? What would that feel like? It may not even be something that we've learned in our day to day because maybe it wouldn't even apply into that box, right? So when we can just really start to make it simple, right? It just becomes a lot clearer. That's the way I look at least when we can take ourselves out of the limitations and we can really just ask those questions of, you know, cause and effect, or working with what is in our immediate environment and day to day. It's like the answer should be simple. And if it's not, and it doesn't make sense, begin to break it down in ways so that you can see connective pieces that are true, um, and do invite in some level of new lens or viewing of something so that you can come to a different conclusion that makes sense for you based on what you're experiencing, rather than chalking it up to be something that maybe potentially keeps you in a rabbit hole. And that can be a, mental health disorder or a disease, or that can even just be something as simple as like, I want to experience this thing in my life, right? But I have this belief that I can't get there, right? We just now, on a very simple way, what can we do to start to make changes, that free us from the limitations that we have been taught in a variety of different ways to put on ourselves. So, next week we'll go into beliefs and emotions as input, because our perception will play a role in all of this stuff. But yeah, any questions for today?
Can you go back, sorry, to that last slide?
Yeah.
Um,
Where does it go?
that's okay. It said something about like, keeping it simple and then what is available to you, to kind of like change your perspective. And that has been something, it's so funny to me how every single time I meet with you, something is like so obviously connected to what I have been going through, like outside of meeting with you. It's just
Okay.
bizarre to me.
That's the beautiful dance of life. And so I want
Yeah.
to even just go back to this piece, because exactly what you just said is this invitation down here at the bottom. If we can really start to see ourselves, right? If we can begin to see the synchronicities, right, and the experiences that are coming through, there's this, in the way that we have our own intuition, right? Universe, source, God, however you want to classify it, has its own intuition too, right? And so when we can step back and begin to see, right, how the things are coming together in whatever way, right? It doesn't necessarily always have to be like a learning or something that you need to maybe move through, but even just beginning to see the universal synchronicity and everything is going to let you start to have this awareness that you get to create your external
Mhm.
experience.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I've felt that. It's just funny to me. Like, um, I I don't know if I shared with the group listening in. Um, but I know I've talked to you, Megan, about focusing more on my finances, and I've been following Dave Ramsey, and trying to like practice his, baby steps and all that kind of stuff. And so I'm listening to their podcast more often lately, and almost always they're kind of preaching um like you can get out of debt. Like you can make your income work for you. you have to get creative with what's available to you. Like, can you sell your car and get a cheaper car so that your payment goes down so that you can put those payments more towards your debt? Can you start selling stuff around your house? Can you get another job? Can you like they're constantly preaching like what is available to you? Because you do have the options, you do have choices, you do have availability. Because so many people call and are like, I have this and I have this and I just like I can't get anywhere with what I have. And like it's just you're so like in your lane that you don't even see the other options available to you.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's funny how it's just coming at me from so many different directions.
And there might be things too that are available to you that you don't even know yet. Right.
Right.
And that's one of the beautiful things about miracles and things of that nature, when you can really allow the divine intervention to, surprise you and wow you. That's another
Mhm.
piece of that, like your internal state creating the external, right? When you're in those spaces of love and gratitude, but even, holding, right, a visual in your mind and letting that frequency be the same thing that is in your heart,
Mhm.
right? Giving thanks for an experience that you haven't given thanks to or for yet, right? When we go into the thoughts and the beliefs next week and some of those things, what will really highlight is when we're in these patterns, right? Day-to-day patterns, we'll end up in thought process patterns that will be emotional state patterns. So we're always going to experience the same thing. And until we can step out of that
Mhm.
and begin to not just see it in the moment, but even just do things differently, right? If we create these habits, the habit is actually the body becoming the mind and moving through something
Yeah.
that we're just going to keep experiencing the same thing.
Right. Right.
Excuse me, it's going to be the butterfly effect. I think that's the phrase. Until, right, you're like, oh, I'm going to do this differently today. And I'm going to, have this, maybe thought or experience that's different. When we start to make those changes, there's so much that happens on that neural level. But again, even just that openness of like, our mind wants to plan the things based on what it's known, but the likelihood of you experiencing something that you want is going to come not just in a way, but through a process that you have no idea about.
Mhm.
So that's where part of that like surrendering, and it's like, well, I don't know. I can learn along the way, right? I can trust that I will develop the skills, the knowledge, whatever it is that as I need it, I go.
Mhm.
But when we really want to experience change, it's going to come through a way that we're not going to expect and we're not going to know because it has to be different from what we're doing already. Otherwise, we're going to get the same thing.
Right. Right. That's an interesting perspective for sure. And it's funny because it's like I know that just based off of where I am today and looking back.
Mhm.
Like,
Yep.
so yeah.
Yeah. Our perception plays a big, big, big role in a lot of different things.
Yeah.
Which is why, even just that I didn't necessarily don't know that I've spoken to this, maybe I have, but like our health journey and our spiritual journey are always going to come together at some point in our experience, because along your health journey, there will be an invitation for you to see yourself differently,
Hmm.
right? That will allow more health to come through in whatever way that means for you, right? For each person. And then when we're in spiritual, like if we're walking a spiritual path, the health journey is going to come because in that spiritual journey, you want to be the clearest vessel for information to come in and to come out of, right?
Yeah.
So again,
Yeah.
health is going to tie into that. Um, yeah, it's just so fascinating. But yeah, next week we'll talk about beliefs and things. But thank you again for bringing up that closed system piece. I'm gonna look into that because
Yeah.
I didn't even catch that word. I didn't even think about it until you said that, and I was like, oh, that
I
actually.
mean, like I do kind of understand it. Like if you think about like, yes, we are all one, but I'm still my own person. Like I'm still a system. Like,
You're still a system, but your system is also, right, going to that like global consciousness,
right.
right? that energy is always at play with energy. So yeah,
Right.
that idea of
But like, how do you think about like new life then? You know what I mean? Like, um, like the population of the earth now, as far as how many humans there are on the earth, like is drastically increased from thousands of years ago. You know what I mean? So like, like, I guess thinking of it in terms of like beings in that sense, like,
yeah.
how was the energy transferred? Or was the energy always there and like it's you know what I mean? I don't know how to if you're following me, but
I am. And what I would say is when we are soul, right? Our soul is energy,
hmm
connects to universal life force energy.
hmm
So in that sense, if this universal life force energy is infinite and all-encompassing,
Yeah,
that creation is the transference of that into another state.
right,
But then things can come in to influence that state
right.
based on daily choices and, you know,
Yeah,
things
yeah.
of that caliber. But yeah, no. Let's sit with that and see.
Yes.
It's given me a lot of different thoughts and pings over the last, I'd say, week. So we'll see where that goes because
Yeah,
we'll go somewhere cool. And
excited for it.
yeah, me too. Um, yeah, I'm gonna pause the recording here. But yeah, if you guys have questions as you watch the replay, you know how to get a hold of me, and I hope you guys have a beautiful day.